Hey there YouTube, Gabe from Nexus Core here with another One Piece card game video. This time we will be going over the green card releases from One Piece Set 2 Paramount War and our continued coverage over the full card reveals that were fully spoiled as of the morning of recording. So first off, in order from the leaders, we have the new green leader with Kinemon. Glad to see that the Wano deck was not forgotten, whose life is 5, power is 5, attribute slash, type Land of Wano, and Akazaya 9, whose effect is during the main phase, once per turn. If you have one or less characters, the next time you play a Wano type character card with a cost of 3 or more from your hand during this turn, its cost is reduced by 1. Now, I'm not the most familiar with the Wano deck. I'm not going to pretend that I am. So I don't know how much better this is over Odin. I think from the little that I know, I would lean towards this solely because they, in effect, do similar things where you get to save Dawn. However, I don't think the deck draws enough to have Odin's discard effect not impact it. So I think being able to not have to discard in a deck that kind of needs its cards is what's pushing me towards Kinemon, even though you only save one as opposed to getting two back. But again, anybody who's more versed in this can please comment down below what you think. But I think this is a solid alternate choice of leader if you want to be playing the Wano build. Next, we have Sanji, who I don't know anybody who would have expected this as the green-blue leader, and I forgot to mention this in the last video, I'm glad we're finally getting new multicolors, because in set 1 we only had the two pairs being purple-blue and red-green. We didn't get any green-blues or green-purples in the last one, so I'm glad we're at least getting the new ones. Sanji, however, is our usual dual color leader, so life 4, power 5, strike attribute, green-blue colors, straw hat crew type. Once per turn, when you play a character with no base effect from your hand, if you have 3 or less characters, set up to 2 of your Dawn cards as active. So basically, once per turn, if you play a vanilla, you get 2 Dawn back. That I think is quite good. I like how it doesn't reduce the cost, so you can't cheat out potentially a high-cost vanilla early, but you do get more vanillas out to play with, and the Dawn to conserve it, which means that you can easily save events for later turns while also playing them. In my experience playing the deck, because green doesn't have a super lot of amount of hand power, and neither does blue, and a lot of the hand power from green kind of comes from character effects like Bonnie and Momo, I feel like this deck kind of loses steam in the playtesting I've done against it. If you lose a board, you just lose everything. So the deck definitely needs probably some advantage generating events to keep afloat, but I think this is a really neat leader, and I'm glad that vanillas are at least getting a leader dedicated to them, because I think it's an underexplored playstyle. The Uta leader just doesn't count. So on to our characters, though, starting with Inuarashi, who I'm glad that we got the Sulong form, because this just looks cool as hell. He is a cost 3, power 4, slash attribute, counter 1000, type Minx, Land of Wano, and the Akazaya 9. The effect is, if all of your Dawn are rested, this character cannot be removed from the field by your opponent's effects. The wording is nice because it does count bouncing or being returned to the bottom of the deck. However, the fact that all Dawn needs to be rested means that you are probably not going to be playing any counter events that turn, solely because a lot of the things that can remove by effect can do it during the main phase. So if your opponent sees you have unrested Dawn, they can just bounce it or return it before you even have the chance to counter. So I think this is fine enough. It has decent protection, but I don't think it's phenomenal with that condition attached to it. Next, we have Usopp, who is a 3-cost ranged attribute, power 5, counter 1, type film Straw Hat Crew. Don't think anybody was expecting film in green or the Straw Hat to get a dedicated green list. So for some reason, the film red deck is film green for the Straw Hats, but whatever. It's a vanilla, so there's not much to say more beyond that interesting new build that green's apparently getting. Next, we have Carrot, who is a 5/5 counter 2000, already good with that counter. Type Minx. End of your turn, you can set a Dawn as active. I think it's kind of funny how this card clashes with the previous Inuarashi, despite both of them being minks. But what can you do? I think this is fine. Having counter 2000 already makes it noteworthy and probably worth it for that alone. The effect is fine if you are running it with Odin. This is just another way of getting a lot of Dawn back for your opponent's turn to play some counter events, so I think that's pretty cool. And it has 5,000 power is the baseline you need to reach. The fact that it's on a cost 5,000 isn't great, but that's where the counter 2,000 comes in. Next, we have our first SR for Kozuki Odin, who is a 8/8 slash attribute, Land of Wano, part of the Kozuki clan for the types. Active during the main phase, you may rest 3 to set this character as active, so it is the kid leader without the discard on itself, and on KO, play up to 1 green Land of Wano character with a cost of 3 or less from your deck, then shuffle. This is phenomenal. So first off, it has the base 8 while it does cost 8. It can set itself as active. So if you really want to protect it from an attack, you can just set it as active and not attack. But also, you can just, as the Supernova deck taught us, you can just put a bunch of Dawn on Odin, attack and pay 3 and attack again. And having that 8,000 base is just so good that your opponent's going to want to get rid of it. But if they get rid of it, you can just search out any cost 3 or less for free. This is such a good card. Just absolutely, absolutely phenomenal. There just really isn't anything to say about it besides how just good it is. Next, we have Kozuki Toki, who is a 1/0 Wisdom attribute, counter 1,000, Land of Wano and Kozuki clan. If you have a Kozuki Odin character, this gets blocker. So, mixed on this, thanks to the Yamato secret rare from the set 1, there are now 2 Kozuki Odin characters, so giving it blocker isn't that hard. But the fact that it's a 1 cost 0 power that has a restriction before it can get blocker kind of sucks. There's enough low cost blockers that, do we really need this? Like, we have Bej. For 1 extra cost, you get Killer with the potential draw, or, you know, not the drawback of needing Odin. So I really don't know if we're going to be seeing Toki in this list. Next, we have Shishilian, another uncommon, whose cost is 2, power 3, attribute slash, counter 1,000, whose effect is on play, pay an additional 2, sets a mink-type character with a cost of 5 or less as active. So, it is a, Kozuki, what's her name? The daughter, whose name eludes me, for, the Wano type, but for mink specifically. Being able to attack with a mink multiple times seems pretty good. I don't think there are many high-statted minks, so there aren't many amazing targets for this, but this definitely builds a solid baseline. Hiyori, that's her name. This builds a solid baseline for a mink deck in the future, depending on how many minks we run. I think just the fact that a lot of minks you want in an Odin deck, but not every mink has a Land of Wano type, makes it kind of a hard thing to juggle. So I just don't know how much play this card will see. Next, we have Jinbei to continue our green Straw Hat Film deck. Cost 2, power 4, attribute strike, counter 1,000, type film, Fishman, Straw Hat Crew. It's a vanilla, not much to say. Next is Tony Chopper, cost 2, power 2, attribute wisdom, counter 2,000. Great that it has 2,000 counter. Type film, animal, Straw Hat Crew. Dawn 1 on attack. Rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. Really torn on this. The counter 2,000 is great. You're similar to a lot of cards with 2,000 power. You're probably never actually playing the thing. You're probably just keeping it for the counter. Because, yeah, you can rest a thing with the cost of 2 or less, but unless you give it more than 1 Dawn, it's probably not going to be hitting. So, unless you really want a dedicated film deck and you really want to play this, this will potentially, the only reason to put this on board is if you're playing the red-green Law, because it's a cheap card to put out on board. So, but having 2,000 counter is always good. Speaking of Law, we have Law, cost 2, power 3, attribute slash, counter 1, type film, Supernova Heart Pirate, active during the main phase. You may pay 1, return itself to the hand to play a character with a cost of 3 from your hand. I'm mixed on this. So the turn you're not going to be using this effect the turn you play it, because if you have the 3 total Dawn available, you can just play the 3 cost card. The fact that it has to be cost 3 specifically kind of blows, not just because you're not saving that much on Dawn. Yes, you could return um, it to your hand to play a 3 cost for 1 while getting it back in your hand. The fact that it's 3 specifically means you are very limited in the amount of targets. I Part of me wishes you could do a 3 or less just to have more things you could potentially play. Again, it might see play because of its low cost in a law deck. What's nice is you could give it 2 Dawn to attack and use a 3rd to bounce it to play a 3 cost, but the fact that it only does 3 specifically, I think is a bit of a drawback that I really don't know about how it would fit into a green film deck or even the Supernova build. Next is Nami, who is our second SR in green. I'm sorry, of course Nami is going to be the SR. Her cost is 3, power 5, attribute special, no counter, type film and Straw Hat Crew. On play on it or when attacking, so both of those to trigger is already really good. You may pay 1 to check the top 3 for a film type other than itself, add it to your hand, and bottom of deck the rest. I think this is quite good, honestly. I think we're getting a decent amount of green film cards already, and a lot of them have a decent typing that they would see play in a red-green law deck. It really depends on how the build shapes up, but I think being able to add any green film is really good, and if we end up getting a green-purple leader, because there's a lot of purple film cards, that's even more overlap. This is a card I think, at this exact point, it's not great right now, but the on play and on attack, plus the ever-expanding list of film cards and multicolor pools, means this card will probably age very, very well. Next is another green film card for Nico Robin. Cost 3, power 4, attribute strike, counter 1, type film and Straw Hat Crew. On play, play a film or Straw Hat character with a cost of 2 or less from hand. This is, I think, pretty decent. This is going to be definitely seeing play in a red-green Supernova Straw Hat Laud build. I think that we're going to be getting a lot of film cards in that. I think this is solid for that red-green law build because it just gets you 2 cards on board for 3 cost. And the fact that you could potentially cheat out a 2-cost card is really good. And the fact that you could potentially bounce her and replay her to reproc her skill. If you have the 5-cost law blocker, the SR, you could play Robin, play Law, bounce Robin, play Robin again, and proc her effect potentially 2 times in a turn. So that's already really good. And this is a great target with the Law card. I'm still a bit torn on it again because I don't think we have a film searcher, but you could play Law on turn 2 or 1 if you go second. Then the next turn, use Law's effect, bounce itself, play Robin. Robin's effect, play Law because it's a film crew, and continue from there on, which makes her a very cool synergy. So if there's a green film searcher so you can guarantee both of them, that would be a nutty combo. So this is why I like to read the cards with you all for the first time, because I didn't realize that combo when I was complaining about Law earlier, and I just think that's really neat. So next we have Neko Mamushi. Wow, this art goes hard for the man. Again, love the Sulong art. Cost 3, power 4, attribute slash, counter none. Type Mink, Land of Wano, Akazai 9. It's a blocker. Really wish they put better art on what was just a vanilla blocker. I don't know, honestly. I think green has enough blockers that you can skip it, and you'd probably just be running it for that type, but it might see play for those type, but there really isn't much to say beyond that. Next is another green film card for Frankie, who, again, is just a vanilla, so 5/7, attribute special, counter 1000, film and Straw Hat Crew. The fact that it costs 5 means it fits in with the red-green law build. It's a film Straw Hat, so it works with Nami. And, yeah, not much more to say. Next, we have Brooke, who is a rare, cost 4, power 5, attribute slash, counter 1, type, film and Straw Hat. On play, play a film or Straw Hat with a cost of 3 or less from your hand. So you can go into Brooke, into Robin, into Law. That's really, really funny. My worry, an initial hesitancy, is this deck might lose due to not having a whole lot of advantage generation outside of Nami. But the fact that you can easily spam out a board is so funny, and because they're all cost 4 or less, you can easily fill it out with the red-green law leader. So this is really neat. Like this is some really funny combos. Next, we have another rare from Monkey D. Luffy for the film build. Cost 7, power 7, attribute strike, color green, obviously type film, supernova, straw hat crew. Effect is blocker, so didn't expect that for a strike attribute and Luffy, but whatever. And his effect is on play, play a film or straw hat with a cost of 4 or less from your hand. So if you just decide to open Nutty somehow, Luffy into Brook into Robin into Law, you have to open the God combo because that is a 4-card combo, but that's just so funny to me. And it's a 7-cost blocker, which is never anything to scoff at. Granted, part of what makes the 7-cost Kid good is it stands itself, but it's still a fat wall your opponent needs to deal with. Next, we have another Yamato in the hybrid form. Cost 4, power 6, attribute count, strike. This card's name is also treated as Odin, so we actually have a third Odin character if you do end up running Toki for the Land of Wano build. And on play, rest an opponent's character with a cost of 6 or less. So this is the scaled up version of cards like Izo and Neko from the first build, but it actually skips a step, because for 2, Neko rested a 3, for 3, Izo rested a 4, but for 4 you can rest a 6 or less and not a 5, which is, I think, pretty cool. So, I think this is decent for that alone, and it's well statted for it, so I can see this seeing some play for that reason. Next, we have Zoro in his fancy boy little ascot. Another vanilla, so 4/6 / counter film supernova straw hat. It's well within that range of cards you can cheat out, so definitely worth it. Next is Wanda, whose cost 2, power 3, attribute / counter 1, type Mink only. Play up to 1 Mink character other than Wanda with the cost of 3 or less from its hand. So I'm thinking that Minks are going to be the green equivalent to the Mountain Bandit / 1-cost red list from the last video. Just a bunch of things that have pseudo synergy but no leader to tie it all together. But I think this is decent. You can just cheat out a card if you have a full Mink build, so it's like all of the other film cards that I said. So I doubt this will see play in the Wano build just because you really want the Wano cards, but hey, this is a funny card just to have. And now we are finally onto the event cards. So we have 3 sword style Onigiri, cost 3, type film, supernova, and straw hat crew. Effect up to 1 of your leader or characters gains 6,000 power during the battle. This, I believe, is a first. I think this is the first counter event with a cost of 3. Everything was 1 or 2. And because it costs 3, it naturally scales up to 6,000 power, because 1 costs usually give 2 and 2 costs usually give 4. Of course, minor deviations from that. But beyond the 6,000 power, then you may play 1 character card with a cost of 3 or less and no base effect from your hand. So you're probably running this in the Sanji deck for that alone. I don't know how much play it will see in general, because you're not running a lot of vanillas in the other builds, but the 6,000 power is definitely pretty good. And if you have cards like Carrot or the Odin leader to get Dawn back at the end of your turn, it might see you play for that. But it also has a trigger effect, which is rest up to 1 of your opponent's leaders or characters with a cost of 5 or less. The fact that you can rest a leader is very interesting. We haven't seen that before. It's a way of potentially countering Kid if your opponent doesn't only attack with him first. So it's just more things to rest. So I think that's actually quite interesting. So next we have an uncommon event, Diable Jean Venez Sans Shoot, cost 2, film and straw hat type. Main phase only, KO up to 1 of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 4 or less. So it's like an event version of Killer. And trigger, you may play a character with a cost of 4 or less and no base effect from your hand. Actually, this and the other trigger, I want to go back to the Sanji leader. Is it's once per turn. So if you get these triggers, you could theoretically use that get 2 Dawn back during your opponent's turn, which might have some potential. But I think this is fine, honestly. The fact that because the Sanji leader gets you the 2 Dawn exactly, you could play a card using all of your Dawn, get 2 back, and still get a kill off, which is decent. The fact that it has to be rested, it's what we expect from green, but it is quite limiting. But it's also pretty cheap in its cost, so it makes sense. Next, we have Paradise Totsuka. Cost 1, type Land of Wano and Kozuki. Main, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. Trigger, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. So I think this is pretty fine. It's kind of like a baby version of Straw Sword. So as we saw with the Onigiri, we were scaling up some events where we're increasing them, but now we're also seeing a scale down, because Straw Sword, while it does cost 1 more, it doesn't have a limit onto what the cost you can rest is, where this does. But being able to hit 4 or less is quite good, and it has a solid trigger, because being able to have your own pseudo version of like who's who in the build is pretty fine. So I think this is decent. And I believe this is going to be it, because we usually end with stages. And again, I am glad stages are not forgotten anymore. So we have the stage, which is Land of Wano, very appropriately named for the Land of Wano build. Cost is 1, so playable turn 1. Type Land of Wano, active during the main phase. You may trash a Land of Wano and rest the stage to set a Dawn as active. So it's like a diet version of the Odin leader. I'm very iffy on that, because, as I said with Kinemon, the fact that green Wano doesn't generate immense amounts of advantage means you are going to be worried about what you're discarding. And the fact that Odin gets you 2 on a discard and not 1 means not doesn't bode amazingly for this. However, you can run this on top of Odin, so if you want, you could discard 2 to get 3 back. You could also run this in Kinemon, just to have a way of reactivating Dawn. So it's kind of, I'm very torn on this. I think it's because you have to discard a card, and as we saw from this, there aren't many ways of Odin Land of Wano decks getting resources outside of things like what we saw in set 1 with Raizo and Momo. So I'm very iffy on this, but another way of getting Dawn back is never bad. But that is going to wrap it up with our coverage of green. What I think is kind of interesting is green seems to have gotten a lot more build support. We got Land of Wano, which makes sense because nothing in green prior was at the Paramount War, so we kind of needed something. We got, as a backup deck, the film build, which took up a lot more space in the build than the backup build in red, because red was all Whitebeard and a couple of the 1-cost things, but film, it doesn't have a dedicated leader, but it is now a deck unto itself with how many cards it got as support. But also we have the green equivalent to the 1-cost red build, which is just pure minx. So, and on top of that, we also got some support for pure, like a vanilla build. So green got like a lot of cards for a lot of different builds, whereas red, it was just kind of Whitebeard and a couple of pack fillers. So I think that's just an interesting thing to note. But yeah, I'm actually pretty interested in this. I think the green film deck is quite neat. I'm wondering what the best leader with that will be. I think there's a lot of, because we saw the free cheating out, a lot of potential with the red-green law build, but I don't know. And yeah, I think green got a lot of interesting tools to play with. I'm kind of disappointed we didn't get any Supernova, but I shouldn't be surprised by that, because as we saw with red, it seems that a lot of the builds from set 1 weren't getting a lot of direct support. We did get some indirect support, of course, because something like Luffy is a Supernova, so you could run it with Supernovas. Some of the Mink stuff is indirect Wano support, etc. So it seems that if this is setting a precedent, outside of the set they're releasing, it seems that a lot of the decks aren't going to be getting more than maybe a card or 2 per set. So I'm hoping that changes. I hope we get to revisit some cards, but I think that because of the 8-cost Odin alone, the Wano deck kind of is a winner unto itself. So Like, this card's just crazy. But yeah, let me know what you all think. Let me know if you thought I got anything about this wrong. I'm just now realizing I got what I said about the precedent wrong, because Land of Wano was a green focused last set, and there's a lot of Land of Wano cards. So, never mind anything I said. I am silly. But let me know again what you all think. Let me know what you are excited about to play so far. And I will see you all in the next video, where I'm going to be continuing on the coverage with the blue cards. Thank you for watching.